John inspired me to want to be a serious musician, but also a serious peace activist. I was a media ambassador for Adopt-A-Minefield program.
In 2003, I was placed in a Hollywood press corps.
But I say the main thing is to get the grassroots movement going, educate people so they understand what's going on and what cowardly weapons these are.
And in 2004, I wrote an article for their international newsletter.
And that's what we've been suffering from, pretended patriotism. They use patriotism to lie us into a war in Iraq. They use patriotism to do drone attacks on children. They use patriotism to demonize Putin or anybody in the country who won't go snap to our fingers, you know. They have used the war on terror to gain a degree of power and observation over the American people that no dictator ever had.
The wind will change, the water main will break, risks happen, and so you gotta kind of always be trying to get more surplus, more profits, because the more you have, the safer you are to face any eventuality. It's built into the system that the capitalist's anxiety about keeping his or her hands on that surplus means you got to use the surplus to build your company to get more surplus and therefore become safer. And so the system has built into it not just the need to get as much surplus as possible, but to grow the enterprise, to build it out. Because if you don't, you risk collapse, disaster.
How do you think your father would look at all this that's going on right now?
When he did The Planet is Fine, that was in 1992 on his Jammin' in New York show. And it was very controversial because, you know, he wasn't saying don't try to save the planet, but he was saying the only reason you're trying to save the planet is because you're trying to save your life, your convenient life. Like, let's just get real about it.
Ego. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you know, you're trying to save it so that you're not inconvenienced anymore.
We have a sickness at the core of our culture, and it's money. And so money now has beaten everything. The core of our culture used to be competition. And now we've gotten rid of competition, which is what's necessary to make capitalism work. There's no more competition. What do you got? 3 telecommunication companies? Yeah. They own all the, Comcast now owns they make the program, they sell the program, they deliver it, they own the cable company that brings it to your house. So we need a Teddy Roosevelt to split up the big antitrusts. We need to do that again. And we need to get money out of politics. Yeah. So that's the way people always say, well, Jimmy, what's your solution to fix all this? You got to break up the big corporations. Right. And then we're bombing again. We've been nonstop bombing. And, you know, they tell us that we're supposed to be afraid of the Muslims because it's their religion that makes them crazy killers, right? That's right. Although there's millions of Muslims living in America and they're not killing us ever. That's right. Maybe it's because we're bombing. You know, if we found out there was oil in Salt Lake City and we started bombing it for 30 years straight, there'd be a lot of Mormon terrorists.
That's right. And we'd find, oh my gosh, there's not oil here. There's only salt.
So that's the problem. We always have bomb money, but we're firing teachers, right? Yes, as soon as the economy crashes, they fire teachers because that's what gets you out of a depression, dumber kids, right, Dan? That's what really...
Well, you know, and there's also this discussion about socialism, is that most people don't even understand what it means. Yes. You know, they think, okay, there's National Socialism, okay? It exists in Scandinavia, okay? It exists in Germany, it exists in where my family's from, in Switzerland. Okay, in the 21st century, yes, it was National Socialism in the 1930s in Italy and in Germany. But they were fascist dictators.
They were fascists, yes.
You know, that's a different thing. And also this thing with capitalism as well, you know, when people say, but more people have been moved out of poverty because of capitalism more than any other system in history. And I'm thinking, that expression, you know, lifting the boats, okay, that's
rising
another
tide
thing.
Does not raise all boats.
But when that did happen to some extent, that was in the
past. That's
we are
right.
now in the 21st century. Capitalism is failing.
Right.
We need to change this.
Well, because first of all, people don't realize that there is no such thing as a free market. There's just markets that we invent, and then we regulate them heavily. And the people with the most money get to rig those economies, those markets, in their favor, which is why when we have a booming economy, all the profits that the workers generate, all those profits go to the upper 1% instead of the people who are actually generating those profits. That's called a broken economy. That's what Marx actually warned people against
Yes.
about capitalism, that capitalism eats itself. And if we don't regulate it like FDR did, it will eat itself. But if you have good regulations on it, everybody's for Social Security, everybody's for Medicare, everybody's for the fire department and the police department and libraries
That's right.
and roads and bridges and national parks. And that's what he says, that's socialism.
But you have a very serious cause to go with your...
Yes, there's a serious side to... when I was in Los Angeles in September, I attended a gala event for an organization called Adopt-A-Minefield. And what they do is they raise money to eradicate minefields around the world, and also to help survivors of blasts and raise the awareness of those needs, which I wasn't aware of until I really went into their website and looked around. And I got to see, Paul McCartney perform with Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys, and I got to see Brian Wilson perform with Paul McCartney and his band. I got to talk to Brian Wilson, actually.
Wow.
And Jeff Lynne, who also has produced the Beatles, and George Harrison, and so it was a very interesting night. And then they asked me if I wanted to find a couple people to work their booth at the Conseco Fieldhouse concert when Paul McCartney was here recently, in October, actually. And then they asked me if I wanted to participate with them in a global event that they're doing all over the world tomorrow night. People are going to be meeting in their homes or at restaurants. We're going to be meeting at Birdie's.
Hello, this is Niswander. I wanted to do some blogs before it gets dark. It's Saturday nights, October the 8th. Lost track of time. And I'm here on the steps of the City Hall here in downtown Los Angeles. For Occupy LA, which is getting a lot of media attention, at least in certain places, as more and more people become aware of what's going on here. It's very peaceful. It's for the most part nonpartisan, except people are welcome to share whatever their views are because, well, it's all about the 99%. Here you can see a lot of posters, signs. There's all sorts of booths set up too. There's a food booth serving free food with a long line. I see supplies, donations, even a bookstore right here. So if you want to read a book, just go, you can pick up a book here, or two or three. And there's also a teepee here. They aren't all tents. Remember, teepees were the original tents, right?
Occupy Wall Street.
That's the most important thing, is what you're doing. You just keep doing it. It sends a real message, I think, that people are in the streets, because it's the only other way to get your voice heard if you don't play the game the way it's been played, with lobbyists, congressmen who are too much influenced by lobbyists, corporate money that influences the politicians. This is really the only alternative, so don't let them convince you to come inside, put on a suit, and hire a lobbyist. That's how you lose. This is how you win.
There were all sorts of religious groups and sexual orientations, and it was not just Democrat and Republican. There were other parties there, other philosophies.
I'm here at Occupy LA today, talking to some people, sharing some ideas, and it's good seeing people come out and support and just kind of bring that sense of community back.
Because remember that we are all atoms that vibrate at the very core of who we are as human beings.
I saw the same thing in New York, Occupy Boston, as well as Occupy LA. The focus is on corporate greed. It talks about individual liberty. It talks about social justice. It talks about democratic accountability, especially the 1% who own 40% of the wealth.
I know that a lot of people out there, if they know about universal basic income, they find it very controversial, right? So for the basics of it, for people who may not know what it is, can you give us a simple explanation?
Sure. Universal basic income is a policy where everyone in a society, let's call it every American citizen, receives a certain amount of money to meet his or her basic needs, no questions asked. It's a right of citizenship. So under my plan, the Freedom Dividend, every American adult would start receiving $1,000 a month, starting at age 18, every month until the day you die.
So, a lot of people would ask you this question, I'm sure, but people want to know, how's that going to get paid for?
Well, the great thing is our economy is up to a record $20 trillion in GDP, up $5 trillion in the last 12 years. And in terms of how to pay for it, if you look around at the big winners from artificial intelligence and new technologies, it's going to be Amazon, Google, Facebook, Uber. And Amazon literally paid zero in federal taxes last year.
And Facebook did too, right?
I have to confirm that,
Yeah.
but I know Netflix paid zero. Would not surprise me if Facebook paid zero or close to zero. So you have to ask yourself, is that their fault or our fault? And so when you ask, how do you pay for this universal basic income? If we put in a new tax to start harvesting the gains from all these innovations and new technologies, we can generate hundreds of billions, which combined with the economic activity from putting this money into people's hands, plus cost savings on things like incarceration and homelessness services and emergency room healthcare, plus the value gains from having a stronger, healthier, better educated, mentally healthier, more productive population would be enough to pay for a dividend of $1,000 a month. The way I described it is that we have to start investing in our people. Companies do this all the time. They expect that they'll win. We have to do the same thing for all citizens.
And a lot of people would wonder about the cost of living, because like in a city like Los Angeles, it's very expensive here. So $1,000 might be okay for Iowa or West Virginia, but what about Los Angeles or Manhattan, for instance?
Well, it's $1,000 a month on top of whatever you're currently making. So it would be a game changer for people in most parts of the country. But it's true that it doesn't go as far in places like Los Angeles as it would in rural communities and places around the country.
I have a quote here of you said, "We are living a lie. Our day of reckoning is now here." Can you elaborate on that?
Did she say that or did I?
You said that.
Oh, I can't believe I said that.
I don't know.
We got it on tape. So. I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's a printing error. Well, we are living a lie, don't you think?
Yeah.
We are in a facade.
Because we don't represent the people that we have in this country.
The two-party system has not been serving we the people. And so until and when we rise together as a nation, as a world, as a country world, that's when we're going to bring about real change.
And we just transform this anger from, negative behaviors and hate to a positive action through theater of the oppressed, through bread and puppets and all kind of techniques that we use, which is challenging, but we're so far succeeding, like step by step, to have more Palestinian, more Israeli joining us and building alliances with other groups and to be seen by the mainstream media. In July, we were in the main Israeli media, like for 11 minutes, one report in Channel 2. In Palestinian TV, we spoke there as well. We brought two ex-fighters from Ireland, from both sides, to show this is our conflict. It's not the only conflict. While people are trapped and feel this is the forever and it's never possible, but that's how every people in every conflict feel. So we been noticed, and as you know, like in nonviolence, they ignore you and then they try to stop you and then they join you, and that's what we believe. But it takes a long time. We need patience.
That comes from Nelson Mandela, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I was in jail while Mandela was in jail at the same time.
As of this morning, more than 8,000 people have signed an online petition on change.org in favor of removing the mayor from office. About 315,000 signatures are needed. Now, the group of residents led by Alexandra Dateague feels the mayor hasn't been proactive and aggressive enough in dealing with the homeless. Whether or not one elected official is solely to blame, some we spoke to this morning stand behind the petition.
I think that would be a step in the right direction to send a message. We have to take drastic steps to send a message to the city, to the people. Hey, we have a need. A lot of people are really upset. What are we going to do about it together? And since you're our elected officials, you're supposed to be in charge.
You have a YouTube video, obviously, that went viral, and we'll get into that in a minute. But one of the reasons why I invited you to come on here is because the red flag for me initially was in March of 2020, and one of my friends who's an investigative journalist, actually, he was the guy that wrote the blogs. After doing the research, where he came up with 0.01% has 40% of the wealth, if you know where I'm going with that,
right?
He's the guy, and he put out this over hour-long video through his networks of this frontline nurse who was working at Elmhurst Hospital, in New York City, which was considered ground zero at the time. And Cuomo was on TV every day because of the disaster, obviously. And she had recorded video on her phone of conversations she had with colleagues, including her superiors and coworkers. And I could just see one story after another, and over an hour now,
of working various floors of that hospital, and they were not getting any good information about how to treat the patients coming in, and you could just hear the stress in their voices, and they just kind of, I don't know what to do. And it was tear jerking. I mean, to hear that stuff, and I said, this is not good. That was my first reaction, when people are not knowing what to do, and they're the professionals that people are relying on. So that was my red flag initially. Your video on YouTube, you spoke to the North Vernon community board, school board there, because they were, obviously looking into reopening the schools back up, trying to figure out what the protocols were. And in just a little over 6 minutes, a brilliant overview of suggestions and what you had known from your personal experience. So you mentioned in that video, you said no vaccine stops infection. You want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, people have come to get this idea that somehow vaccination makes it so there's a bubble around you that the virus can't penetrate. That's not how these things work. You actually get infected. It's just that your immune system responds so quickly and so accurately that it eradicates the pathogen before it can cause enough inflammation to make you have symptoms. But it's not the case that you somehow just never get virus in you. You get virus in you, and in some vaccination situations, the COVID-19 one being very clearly one of these, you actually get virus in you and you shed virus as much as an infected, in some studies, more than a naturally infected person does. And I think the complexities of vaccines and immune system interaction is very poorly understood by the general population. And what the CDC and the FDA are doing is just muddying the waters and simplifying complicated interactions down to the level of idiocy.
So the governments of China and a consortium of Western governments all got together and put millions and millions of dollars into an effort to develop a coronavirus vaccine. When you get the vaccine, it appears that you have an antibody response, but when you actually encounter the wild virus, you become much sicker. And it actually creates a pathway that virus hurts you a lot more than with unvaccinated people. So this was 2012.
April 10th, 2020. Grand Park in downtown Los Angeles was the site of Defeat the Mandates rally. The focus was on opposing vaccine and mask mandates, which of course means standing up for freedom of choice and freedom of speech. It was a gathering of about 20,000 people, spanned at least 8 hours, and featured dozens of speakers and performers from across the spectrum. All present, ages, ethnicities, races, political leaning, right, left, Democrats, Republicans, independents, vaccinated, unvaccinated. From all across the country, all backgrounds, economic statuses. People flew in with private jets and others came on public transportation. It was preceded by a march led by firefighters from Fire Station 4 downtown with allies to the park. The diversity of speakers represented the diversity of people in this movement. Doctors, nurses, fire and police, frontline workers, activists, nonprofits, reverends, a Christian pastor, a rabbi, a Muslim minister, vaccine injured and families, attorneys, educators, media personalities, Hollywood actors, comedians, musicians, filmmakers, a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, investigative journalists, military personnel and officers, truck drivers, the inventor of the mRNA technology used in Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, and more. Dale Bigtree, the host, an Emmy Award-winning producer of Doctors on CBS TV, now online with The Highwire Show, and his media team did a phenomenal job producing the event.
I'm fantastic. I just got off the stage in front of tens of thousands of people. There's like 20, 30,000 people out there. It's rock star time, man. Can't beat that.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's about time.
Hello, Mr. Kennedy. My name is Dan Niswander, independent media. We have to deal with these issues, and when there is a Kennedy administration, are we going to see a sequel to Benny Deal, new jobs programs, regulating Wall Street, securing Social Security? What do you intend to do once you are president of the United States?
I'm a traditional Kennedy Democrat. I think human dignity, and particularly dignity of the workers, and the American middle class are the foundation stones not only of our economy but American democracy. I grew up in a period in American history that economists call the Great Prosperity.
The economy is at the base of everything. I did one of the documentaries that I created was called The Roots of Society and the Enlightenment of Solutions. And the roots meaning that everything, like the tree, I compared it to a tree, the economics is like the roots of the tree. If you don't have a strong economic system, that tree will not survive. Doesn't matter what kind of fruit or leaves or branches you have on the tree, it won't survive without a strong system of roots in the ground that you can't see even. And so I compared that example of the tree to basically to our life on the planet. And that's why even all of the justice, the foreign policy issues you're talking about, everything in our society, all the justice is really under that foundation of economics.
I'm also the founder of the Center for Political Innovation, which is an educational socialist nonprofit. We educate people about opposing war and opposing empire and, trying to bring a new perspective to anti-imperialism and socialism, looking beyond left and right, but toward what brings us together, how we can build community.
That's what free speech is about. Not everything we agree with, right? And I also want to talk about the Center for Political Innovation. I've interviewed Caleb Maupin in one of the segments, if you heard the radio show a while back. He wrote a book about Kamala Harris, which I think Tulsi Gabbard read, or because some of the content she shared at the debate, if you remember. But anyway, we're opening a local chapter here in the LA area for Center for Political Innovation.
And discussing about what we want to do to start our presence here in the LA area. CPI, we're here at the end of the parade route in East Pasadena. We need a government of action. Yes, exactly. The Uhuru case. Yeah. That was actually a victory for free speech. So we're here at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, which is featuring 3 performances of Shen Yun here with Ishmael. We're getting looks.
China before communism. This show is trying to portray China was better before communism, but it wasn't. And it's trying to pull out your heartstrings to say like, oh, we gotta go and restore this beautiful feudal society where like people were dancing around and music was everywhere. But this is just so to manufacture consent so Americans are able to agree and say, yeah, we must do regime change in China.
And I'm lucky enough where my house survived. About 10 houses survived in my street. There used to be 40 houses on that street. Wow. But I've been pretty much roughing it. We don't have water until April at the earliest. But we didn't have power until the day before Valentine's Day. And then the day of Valentine's, the day of before Valentine's Day, we had a mudslide and a flood at the same time. And so I had to evacuate my house the 3rd time.
We need a serious alternative, which is the Center for Political Innovation. No war with China, Russia, and Iran. Stop killing in Palestine, Yemen, Syria. Stop fascism and Nazism in Ukraine.
At the end of the day, it's money in politics. It doesn't matter where that money is coming from necessarily. There's lobbyist groups of all kinds. And, when Obama was president, the Supreme Court passed Citizens United, which put that on steroids. Right. Basically, it had already been in place, but now anything goes. And we're seeing the influence of AIPAC in practically every part of our government. So it's like, and even Trump, I think at the Knesset even admitted, to the world that, we're getting all this money from, Miriam Edelson and all this. And, the irony of this event here is George Soros funds a lot of the No Kings events. And he's technically, by principle, you could say he's a king.
Now attend a nationwide outcry against President Trump's threats of attacks against Venezuela and controversial attacks on boats in the Caribbean. During an appearance at the Reagan Library in Simi Valley today, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said President Trump could use the U.S. military as he sees fit.
Demonstrators in downtown L.A. this afternoon loudly disagree with that idea. Jillian Smukler joining us live from Hollywood tonight with more on that story. Jillian.
Hi, Rick and Karine. Yeah, hundreds of people gathered in downtown Los Angeles today, joining a nationwide call to stop U.S. military action in Venezuela. And protesters tell us they're trying to send a message not only to the White House, but also to the world. People in more than 60 cities nationwide are rallying in what they call a last-ditch push to stop what they fear is a new U.S. war.
One, proxy war after another, and people are just tired of it.
What is it all for? It's all for money. It's all for greed.
In L.A. County, protesters say the Trump administration's escalating strikes in the Caribbean and new comments from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth are clear warnings of a much larger conflict ahead.
We've been bombing fishing boats that, supposedly have drug traffickers on them, but it's really not about drug trafficking. It's about oil and economics.
The National Day of Action targets the administration's recent military campaign, including 22 strikes on alleged drug boats since September.
If you're working for a designated terrorist organization and you bring drugs to this country in a boat, we will find you and we will sink you.
More than 70% of Americans oppose military intervention.
Well, a lot of it is money in politics. I mean, we spend a lot of money on war, and I think people are really tired of that when we need to invest in our own country and not in destruction overseas. And I think that's really what's on people's minds more than anything else.
Earlier this week, President Trump said land strikes could begin, quote, very soon. Protesters here in Los Angeles say they're trying to stop that before it starts.
Well, very good. I think we have enough time to take one listener question. So let's do that for a Facebook question. This is from Dan Nowman, who asks, do you feel that a big economic crash is inevitable, and what kinds of alliances can be created to reach the masses with thoughtful, factual messages?
Well, I can't predict an economic crash is inevitable because you have socialism bailing out capitalism. At our big rally in Wall Street a few years ago, we had a big sign, socialism bailing out capitalism, otherwise known as bailing out Wall Street on the backs of U.S. taxpayers via Uncle Sam. That's the system we have in place. We've got to recognize it, that without socialism bailing out capitalism, capitalism would have collapsed about every decade in these banking crises and rampant speculation with other people's money like pension money. So is a big economic crash inevitable? There may be a crash, but you, the taxpayers, are going to have the safety net on your back, not to mention growing unemployment from such a crash. What kind of alliances? I think if you read my book, you'll see all kinds of alliances, left, right, back home, people you don't ordinarily associate with politically or electorally. But on these issues, and I have 24 issues, which include the issue of bailing out Wall Street, there's a huge majority of left-right saying break up the big banks, break up any corporation that's too big to fail, and crashes on the taxpayer's back.
Well, thank you, Dan Nowman, for that Facebook question.
What we need is a government of action that'll pave the roads, that'll hire the unemployed, that'll start rebuilding the country. We have a 4-point economic plan to improve the United States. Step 1 is a mass program of construction. Hire the unemployed, put them to work doing useful work, building, constructing, etc. Step 2 is public control of our natural resources. America's oil, America's coal, America's timber, America's natural gas. The wealth from that should go into the public budget. And then the third stage would be public control of our banking system. And then our fourth step would be the enactment of an economic Bill of Rights, which is what our President Roosevelt called for in his final State of the Union address. The right to a job, the right to housing, the right to education. And I tell people we shouldn't view these things as a handout.
My first introduction to activism could have been when I was sitting in an auditorium with other kids watching a black and white TV the day that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot in Memphis. Or maybe when my dad took the family to Deschler, Ohio to see then candidate Richard Nixon campaigning for president from the back of a train. He saw a sign in the crowd that said, "Bring us together again," and that became part of his campaign slogan going into the final days of the 1968 election. Fast forward to the late 80s when I was teaching English in Japan, And I chose to hang out with people in my leisure time that weren't from the United States. And many of them asked me, why do so many Americans think that Ronald Reagan is such a great president? And I couldn't answer that question. I had a Libyan roommate for 1 week who told me about President Muammar Gaddafi, and because he did well in school, he was able to get free education at a university anywhere in the world. When I returned home to North Hollywood, my focus in the 1988 election was not Bush. I did start listening to the mostly lefty Pacifica radio station KPFK at around that time, but I really wasn't that engaged with politics. I went back to the Midwest in the early 1990s. I worked in the corporate world during the day and played music in the scene in Indianapolis at night and on the weekends. I made 2 albums of my original music at professional studios and became quite popular playing in the central Indiana music scene. I played many shows with my band, including a big Clear Channel music festival, and played live on Fox 59 Morning News twice. There were quite a few local charity events that I participated in with my rock band. But I wanted to step up and do something more high profile. John Lennon inspired me to want to be a serious peace activist.
John inspired me to want to be a serious musician, but also a serious peace activist.
A group of activists formed a nonprofit called the Olive Branch Society, whose primary purpose was to help provide resources for other nonprofits in their charity and fundraising projects. We started with Adopt-A-Minefield, and we worked with other groups such as V-Day.
I was a media ambassador for Adopt-A-Minefield program,
a position that I served from 2003 to 2006. It was also an organization whose goodwill ambassador was another Beatle, Paul McCartney.
To working on 2 fronts, for people to help us to do all this clearance and survivor assistance, but also for people to push the local governments and just say, look, we don't want landmines. Let's just outlaw these devices. This is a start. As Heather said, this is raising the awareness, and we go from here. We've already helped a lot of people. But I say the main thing is to get the grassroots movement going, educate people so they understand what's going on and what cowardly weapons these are.
I learned about the international landmine crisis and met other activists from various parts of society, scientists, NGO workers, deminers, representatives from the U.S. State Department, the entertainment industry, entrepreneurs, and more. In 2003, I was placed in a Hollywood press corps, and in 2004, I wrote an article for their international newsletter. I also co-produced 4 local shows in Indianapolis that featured mostly musical acts. There was one event where my band, a naval captain who flew in from Washington, D.C., and a guitarist that had played with a very young Jimi Hendrix in a band called The Presidents in Indianapolis in the 60s, actually shared the stage. I returned to the LA area to reinvent myself in the late 2000s. On September 17th, 2011, Occupy Wall Street began in Lower Manhattan of New York City. It led to the largest gatherings of people to discuss economic injustices in public places since the Great Depression of the 1930s. In October 2011, I became part of the Occupy Los Angeles media team, and later was one of the primary organizers of Occupy the Rose Parade in Pasadena.
There was a summit at All Saints Church and also in Memorial Park. In All Saints Church, it was the first time that there was public discussion about the foreclosure crisis in Los Angeles. The next day, at the Rose Parade, one of the biggest public events in the world, there was a peaceful People's Parade that followed the traditional Rose Parade. And tens of thousands of people this year were exposed to the message of the 99%. Images, including video, went viral all over the world.
Tom, what do you think, what do you see as the future of Occupy?
What do I see as the future of Occupy? I think we're standing amongst it right now. Thank you very much. Future of Occupy is excellent t-shirts such as this one. Yeah.
I think what's exciting is that we're listening to each other and we're kind of discovering together what it will be.
We could knock some sense into the government.
Ben, what do you see as the future of Occupy, or just for the future? What hope do you have?
Well, I'm a hopeful guy. You know, I try to remain hopeful from sun up to sundown. Not always easy, and that's challenged by the minute. But, you know, you see people like this who aren't complacent, and that motivates and inspires me to not be complacent with the status quo.
Hello, this is Dan Nowman Niswander, and I am here with comic Lee Camp, who is in Los Angeles right now.
We rank on the depression scale in the world, like we're pretty high up there. And a lot of poorer countries look at us and go, oh, they have it so easy. It's so happy there. They just all have money and food and they have big cars, and it's just, they must all just be so happy, and people are miserable. And they're miserable because this is an empty value system. And I think that a lot of people know that deep down. And some of them will get angry at you for dredging it up and shoving it in their faces. But a lot of other people, and even some of the ones that get angry, go home, and I think it starts to awaken something. And I think that it takes, just like it takes a lot of punches to knock down a fighter, it takes, I think, a lot of those kind of punches to ultimately wake someone up.
In 2012, I interviewed David DeGraw, who many believe did create the 99% movement. David DeGraw asked me to make a contribution to his book. The Occupy Wall Street movement coming into manifestation is the first time in my life that I really felt the genuine oneness of the whole of humankind on this earth planet. The passion and the true empowerment of that revelation not only continues to drive me to further deepen my ethical values and roots, but to also use all of my talents and skills and to seek out others even more who share this passion and desire to be an active part of a global consciousness that at its core is focused on genuine love and justice for all. The phenomenon of these new relationships continue to inspire and challenge while keeping the ego in check. The whole experience will surely evolve into something beyond anything that we can currently envision, but our mission can no longer be denied in this present moment now as we go forward. From 2014 to 2016, I was the acting chair of the Community Advisory Board of KPFK-FM in Los Angeles, one of the stations of the Pacifica Radio Network, the originators of public radio. In 2014, I also created an internet radio show that featured music and politics, which I produced from 2014 to 2016 on killradio.org. I also created a cable access television show in 2014, which I continue to this day. It is called The Nowman Show on the KTLA Channel, and it is a cultural magazine variety show focused on arts, entertainment, education, and news. It literally includes live performances as well as interviews with a variety of people, from household names in entertainment and politics, from award-winning musicians, actors, and filmmakers, to U.S. presidential candidates, educators, activists, and much more.
I am here with Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being on the Nowman Show. Let's talk about income inequality. What do you have to say about that? Bernie, you have a lot to say about that, right?
Yes, I do. I think income when the top 1% of the top 10% of the top 1% of the top 10% of the top 1% of the top 10% controls a smaller percentage of the wealth than all will combine. I don't think that's fair.
Excuse me. There's no economic inequality. I've got a lot of money and I'm very comfortable. And I think people who are poor, they can work for me. And if they don't work for me, then we'll ship them out of the country. But the point is, we're going to have jobs. We're going to have so many jobs. Jobs is in the Bible. There's the book of Job. It's right there. It's all you need to know.
The history of socialism in this country is not so different from the history elsewhere. Basically, since capitalism arose as a system and it came to the United States with the colonists who took over this country from the Native Americans, capitalism has been the way that the system organized itself, employers and employees. And like all systems, capitalism in the United States and elsewhere has had the people who love it and the people who don't, the people who think it's a great achievement and the people who think we can and should do better. The folks who think we can and should do better, over time, adopted a name for themselves, and the name was socialists. Their idea was capitalism is a system set up for a minority of people, the few who own the factories, the offices, the stores, who are in a position to decide what gets produced and what gets done with the profits. And they run the system to benefit themselves. And the critics said, yeah, but that's the problem. The system benefits you because you run it, but we, who are the majority, and in whose name a revolution in America against Britain was run, we are being left out. So we want the whole society to benefit, not just you, and so they took the name socialists. They did it in Europe, they did it here. And so the irony of it is that socialism is capitalism's shadow. You can't get rid of your shadow, and capitalism can never get rid of socialism, because socialism is the name for the people who are critics. And you can imagine that the system will one day be so wonderful that they will have no critics. But that's never happened in the history of the human race, and it's really a long shot this time.
And you are obviously a medical doctor. What is the best way going forward to get a single payer in this country? Most countries have that, and we need it too.
Exactly. We need it, and we can afford it, in fact, because it doesn't cost any more than what we are paying right now. It simply ensures that our healthcare dollars are paying for healthcare, not for health profiteering. We need a healthcare system that is established for people, not for making profit. So again, this is all a matter of achieving critical mass. We need to come together as the many movements we are for health justice, for climate justice, for racial and economic and LGBT justice, and women's justice. When we get together with the courage of our convictions, we're unstoppable.
I would say from my experience, it's very important to reconnect to our humanity. And you know what this revolutionary person in South America said, stay human. That's one of the principles that I really believe, including with people that you don't agree with, and you have to engage with them. And then, you know, the enemy, our common enemy is the fear, actually, from each other. This is a big thing, because many Palestinian Israelis and other people around the world, if you take it to any other conflict, they don't believe that the other side want peace anyway. That's the majority. So we came as a proof that there are people on both sides, the majority, want to live normally, like in dignity, like everywhere in the world, you know.
And you wanted to basically rebel against the mainstream narrative, which the film portrayed very well. Also, you know, showing the different sides of the television media news.
Philosophers like Alan Watts.
Yeah.
He said something interesting. He said, you know, money isn't wealth; it just measures wealth. Right. So when the stock market crashes, we still have the same wealth in America. There's just an accounting problem. He said that's like showing, you know, if you show up at the bank and they go, we're out of money, we'll print more. He goes, it's just like showing up at a construction site and saying, hey, we were out of inches. What? Go get, what do you mean you're out of, they just measure what you're doing. Exactly. They're not what you're doing.
People that were controversial but powerful and important and underrated. Henry Wallace.
Henry Wallace was probably the only vice president of the United States who people thought of as a radical and a socialist.
Yeah.
He was the vice president under Franklin Roosevelt.
The last term of Roosevelt.
No, the second term of Franklin Roosevelt.
The next to the last term, right.
And then he had been a farmer in Iowa. He was an editor of a farmer's newspaper. He was an agronomist and an economist about agriculture. And Franklin Roosevelt appointed him at first to be Secretary of Agriculture. And he did such a great job, and he was part of sort of the left wing of the New Deal.
Extraordinarily popular with
he was one of the
and all that.
Yes, he was one of the most popular figures in America. And so he was so popular that when Roosevelt ran for his second term, he said, I want this guy to be my vice president. So Henry Wallace became his vice president. And then he became more radical, even more radical. And a lot of the more mainstream Democrats said to Franklin Roosevelt in 1944, you really should get rid of this guy.
Yeah.
And so he did. He made him the Secretary of Commerce, but he didn't give any power. And so he replaced him with a little-known, ineffectual senator from Missouri named Harry Truman.
Yeah. How did that come about? And didn't that transition happen at the Democratic Convention?
It came about at the 1944 Democratic Party convention, where the more moderate, middle-of-the-road, mostly big city mayor types didn't want Wallace. They wanted Truman, who had been kind of a hack politician in St. Louis, in Missouri, kind of a tool of the local political machine called the Prendergast machine.
Yeah.
And so when they allowed Wallace to disappear and they brought in Harry Truman.
Didn't they do that over the course of the convention?
Yeah, they did, yeah. And people thought that Wallace might have been able to win if it came to a vote, but they maneuvered it. And Roosevelt kind of was passive about it. He didn't want to cause any controversy.
Right. And he was not well at the time.
Right, and he wasn't well. And so, so they got rid of Wallace as vice president. They brought in Franklin Roosevelt. And so in 1948, after being frustrated by Truman not being progressive enough, Wallace ran for president on the Progressive Party ticket, a third party ticket. When he first announced, people thought, oh, he could do pretty well because he's a popular figure. But he got red baited. People said he was a communist or was sympathetic to communism. And he had some very radical ideas. He believed in racial integration. He was pro-union. He believed that we should end the Cold War with the Soviet Union and find ways of mutual cooperation.
And that's considered radical.
Which was very radical back then during the Cold War. And so at the end of the day, he got 2% of the vote. And he disappeared from history and from history books. And so hardly anybody's ever heard of.
2020 was a wild year for all of us. It started for me as an opportunity to share some positive messages on the national broadcast show America's Got Talent.
I believe that it's a critical time in our history right now to bring people together, and I think what better way to do it than with music?
All right, Mr. Nowman.
As the year progressed, the journalist in me was researching a lot of information regarding the whole scenario unfolding with lockdowns and masks, and then mandates and COVID-19 vaccines. I produced a lot of media on these subjects, which broadcasted on my television show.
Since March 2020, we have seen censorship and marginalization of effective early treatments for COVID. When people were sick or had tested positive for COVID and had symptoms, we were told by the mainstream, just wait for a vaccine. We have been seeing protests of mandates and vaccination passports all over the world. We have seen protocols change in mask wearing.
Government's been trying for almost 30 years to develop a coronavirus vaccine, and it's been unsuccessful. So the governments of China and a consortium of Western governments all got together and put millions and millions of dollars into an effort to develop a coronavirus vaccine. And between 2002 and 2012, or 2014, they worked very hard to do that. And what happened is they developed about 35 vaccines. And 4 of them were really promising. They chose the 4 most promising, and they gave them to ferrets, which is the animal that is most analogous to human beings when it comes to upper lung respiratory infections. The ferrets had a brilliant, robust, and durable antibody response. But then something horrible happened. And those ferrets were challenged when they were exposed to the wild virus. They got horribly sick. They got inflammation throughout their bodies, and they died. There was something that they called enhanced immune response. It's also called pathogenic priming. And what it means is that when you get the vaccine, it appears that you have an antibody response, but when you actually encounter the wild virus, you become much sicker. And it actually creates a pathway that virus hurts you a lot more than with unvaccinated people. So this was 2012.
We really do need to have, as Dr. Dan Stock said,
very, very courageous and calm conversations. I don't think a lot of people realize why fear is so effective. But fear limits your ability to get into your memories, and it limits what you can pay attention to. And it limits how deeply you can reason. That's not just human training, that's human physiology. You have an entire section of your brain which is designed to suppress memories when it has something that thinks very timely. And so we can learn to control that part of our brain.
It's now or we're in trouble. Like, now is the time for everybody to join together. And the last thing is this. It doesn't matter what your religion is. It doesn't matter what side you think you are on related to your political affiliation. It doesn't matter even if you've gotten the COVID shot or not, whether you're vaccinated or not vaccinated. It doesn't matter your religion. None of those things matter right now. What is happening is greater and bigger than anything we've ever faced in human history, my friends.
The LAUSD, the Los Angeles Unified School District, putting a pin in its own policy, mandating vaccinations for their kids in the second largest school system in the country. These are ways of showing the public that we are going to step back a little bit. We might be a little too aggressive or whatever, or we are too aggressive on this. But they're just going to wait for another opportunity to put another tactic in to move their agenda forward, whatever their agenda is. And we can speculate about what their agenda is, especially when you understand that even Pfizer, one of the manufacturers of the vaccines, profited by tens of billions of dollars last year just from the vaccines alone. Now, if that does mean something, to think that that's something that is out of the ordinary or shouldn't be focused on is just ridiculous. And there's a lot of other factors as well. The UK, Israel, Gibraltar, I believe Scotland, places like this are more vaccinated than even the United States. And they're seeing more and more people in hospitals with COVID or because of COVID that are vaccinated once or twice or booster. There's the demand for more hospital beds or whatever. And also there's still no talk about healthy lifestyles, promoting healthy lifestyles, exercising more, better diets, more vitamins, those kinds of things. Or in dealing with even like colds and flus, natural immunity, supposedly, according to some, doesn't exist and never has existed. It's ridiculous. The CARES Act of 2020 that happened as the lockdown was happening in March of 2020 was the largest wealth transfer in the history of humankind. Now, supposedly that money was going to basically owners of essential businesses for the most part, and they would decide in many cases where that money would go from there. It was a bailout, just like the banks were bailed out. The two big to fail banks in 2008. Nobody went to jail. What's the real early treatments? Oh, we've heard of monoclonal antibodies, which are quite expensive. We heard of remdesivir, quite expensive, both under patent and, remdesivir's trials were horrendous. Something like 40-50% of the people involved in the trials died or had developed severe kidney problems, and they had to stop using it, but Fauci included it in the emergency use authorization.
The overwhelming number of deaths, over 75%, occurred in people who had at least 4 comorbidities. So really these are people who were unwell to begin with.
There's been over a 20-to-1 return.
If you had put that money into an S&P 500 and reinvested the dividends, you'd come up with something like $17 billion, but you think it's $200 billion.
Here, yeah.
You're okay. You're not going to get COVID if you have these vaccinations.
These vaccines are highly, highly effective.
Vaccinated people do not carry the virus, don't get sick.
They're really, really good against variants.
Everyone who takes the vaccine is not just protecting themselves, but reducing their transmission to other people and allowing society to get back to normal.
Get your first shot, and when you're due for your second, get your second shot.
Our key goal is to stop the transmission, to get the immunity levels up so that you get almost no infection going on whatsoever.
When people are vaccinated, they can feel safe that they are not going to get infected.
If you're vaccinated, you're not going to be hospitalized, you're not going to be in an ICU unit, and you're not going to die.
Both the president and I are vaxxed, and did you get the booster?
Yes.
I got it too.
If you are fully vaccinated, you no longer need to wear a mask.
Anyone who is fully vaccinated can participate in indoor and outdoor activities, large or small, without wearing a mask or physical distancing. But what they can't do anymore is prevent transmission.
We didn't have vaccines that block transmission. We got vaccines that help you with your health,
but they only slightly reduce transmissions. We need a new way of doing the vaccine.
The level of virus in the nasopharynx of a person who's vaccinated and infected is the same level as the level of virus in the nasopharynx of an unvaccinated person.
Reports from our international colleagues, including Israel, suggest increased risk of severe disease amongst those vaccinated early.
And if you look at Israel, which has always been a month to a month and a half ahead of us, they are seeing a waning of immunity, not only against infection, but against hospitalizations and to some extent death. A booster might actually be an essential part of the primary regimen that people should have.
Plan is for every adult to get a booster shot.
It's clearly one of the best investments I've ever been involved in.
In 2021, I co-founded a group called Natural Health First, which was a combination of emotional support as well as activism. One of the activists was a member of the local station board of KPFK-FM, and she created a radio show called Rebel Alliance News.
According to Reuters, as of September, Israel's ground and air campaign has killed more than 41,500 people, with the majority of identified victims being women and children. The campaign now continues into southern Lebanon. For a year, protests and marches have continued all around the world. In Los Angeles, nearly 24 student groups from 22 colleges and universities have joined the Palestinian youth movement. I attended the march in downtown Los Angeles on Saturday and spoke with one of the leaders of the Palestinian youth movement.
Hello, this is Dan Nowman with KPFK's Rebel Alliance News, and I'm here with
Nadia Mahanna.
And Nadia, you are here today at the 1 year of genocide and 1 year of resistance rally in downtown LA today, and you represent what group?
The Palestinian Youth Movement.
That's awesome. And how many people would you estimate are here today?
For sure in the tens of thousands. We had some drone footage, so we'll be able to get more accurate numbers after we look back at that footage.
That's fantastic. So what are your feelings now, where we are now, and looking back and going forward?
Yeah, we are here, like you said, to commemorate the 1 year of genocide, 1 year of resistance. Our people in Lebanon and in Palestine have remained steadfast. They've been subjected to collective punishment simply for refusing to lay down under the heels of the Zionist entity and die quietly. We're here today ultimately because we know it's our responsibility to create a crisis within imperialism and the political establishment. The people here know that the ruling class do not support or work in their interests. Ultimately, we know that the people of the world stand with Palestine, and we know this because for the last year alone, millions of people have taken to the streets, shutting down airports, bridges, train stations, and sparking a student intifada on their university campuses in support of the liberation of our people. Ultimately, we are here today not only to demand an end to the Israeli aggression in Palestine and broadly in the region, but also to demand a full arms embargo, because we know that a ceasefire cannot happen without an arms embargo against Israel.
And the president just has to make a phone call, and in 5 minutes we could end the shipments to Israel, just like that.
Yep, exactly.
Hello, Mr. Kennedy. My name is Dan Niswander, independent media from Pasadena, also KPFK-FM's Rebel Alliance News. I'm the grandson of Swiss immigrants, and I know you mentioned that most of the people coming across the border were coming because of money and not because of political asylum. I know my grandparents came here because they wanted a new life here in the United States. That being said, the U.S. Congressional Budget Office's own report that they released last year, from 1989 to 2019, the bottom 50% of the population economically was sharing 2% of the wealth. So we have to deal with these issues, and when there is a Kennedy administration, are we going to see a sequel to the New Deal, new jobs programs, regulating Wall Street, securing Social Security? What do you intend to do once you are president of the United States?
I'm a traditional Kennedy Democrat. I think human dignity, and particularly dignity of the workers, and the American middle class are the foundation stones not only of our economy but American democracy. I grew up in a a period in American history that economists call the Great Prosperity. It was a period of approximately, 50 years, 40 to 50 years following World War II, when the American middle class became the greatest economic engine in the history of mankind. So at the time that I was a young man, our country owned half the wealth on the face of the earth. And the American middle class was flourishing. We were producing products that everybody in the world wanted. People, when I went abroad, people would do anything to buy Levi jeans that I was wearing. People wanted American cars. In Europe, I traveled a lot with my father and my mother when I was little. And they wanted our electronics, RCA Victrola and radios, and transistor radios, all these things that we had invented. And we were beloved around the world. People loved the United States of America.
Princeton study in 2014, after studying something like 180 bills and policies from 81 to 2001, that the conclusions were we're 100% oligarchy. They didn't find anything in those bills or those policies that was democratic. Yeah. So basically you have a handful of people making all the decisions, all the important decisions for everyone else. And George Carlin used to say, we don't have any choices. Or you can choose what kind of yogurt flavor or cereal, but you don't really have any choices. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's really, so obviously true. And the main point to make about choices, we used to have those pictures when we were celebrating or bringing democracy to Iraq with the overthrow of Saddam Hussein, who had nothing to do with 9/11, and Al-Qaeda couldn't operate in Iraq. So it's maybe the biggest or clearest lie in U.S. foreign policy history. You use the attack of 9/11 as justification to go war in Iraq, and that's the one place where Al-Qaeda couldn't operate, and he had nothing to do with it. They had nothing to do with it. So yet when we were bringing democracy, supposedly, you show these women they're in their chador or whatever, and they're holding up their purple stained finger because they had voted, right? I voted. Well, they all voted for what the Ayatollah had told them, or some other tribal leader or something had told them. Well, is that what you mean by democracy? Well, how are we different? If you're making a decision about a president who took us to this war and engaged in policies of torture and lied to us, and you don't have access to the information, right? Like that was what Daniel Ellsberg did with the Pentagon Papers. Said, no, I worked on this history within the Pentagon about the Vietnam War, and I see it's a tissue of lies. Mm-hmm. The American people have been deceived. Now, this is an ex-Marine, Daniel Ellsberg, had supported the war. He said, well, it's all lies. I got to let the people know. I got to take this to the Washington Post, the first New York Times, then the Washington Post, get it out there. Well, he faced 130 years in jail,
That's right.
under Nixon. So here you have now the same lies. So the vote means nothing. The vote means nothing if they can keep the basic information, whether it's about trade agreements or it's about going to war. Yep. If you don't have the information, an uninformed vote doesn't mean anything.
That's right.
It's a parody, right? And that's what you're really talking about now. And these idiots that go around saying, oh, lesser evil, lesser evil. This is maybe if we don't have run out of time.
Let's take a little break.
No, before you. Oh, okay. You want to take a break?
We're down to 30 seconds. So let's take a little break and come back in another segment and continue where we left off.
Let me take my 30 seconds.
Okay.
Cut it out. I just want to say the lesser evil. That's a big cop out because the people who brought this country to misery right now, with wars that can't be justified, with an economy that raped the average American for the interests of Wall Street, they were the establishment. It wasn't Donald Trump. It was establishment that Hillary Clinton and her husband played a very central role in it.
Let's talk about the yellow vest. How did this start? Why did it start? Like, what was the catalyst? Because there's always something, right, that gets a huge group of people wearing funny clothes and throwing batteries at their public officials.
The trigger event was the rising price on the diesel fuel. And then somebody just called out, say, hey, let's grab your yellow vest and let's go to the Champs-Elysees, let's start protesting. And that's what happened. And when they went out that day, which was November 18th, 2018, they had no idea there were going to be
thousands upon thousands of people there.
Well, I mean, that's no small turnout. Either,
No,
you know,
then that's not the first day in that picture right there. That's that's on the Seine River.
Yeah.
People decided, this is what they did when they went to work, right? We're not going to pay the gas for our vehicles, so we're just going to get on the Seine River and go to work.
Oh, okay.
That's kind of that. That's what that kind of represents. The yellow vest is about really the realization that the people don't have the power. So people don't understand too. How many people understand that democracy comes from a couple Greek words that translates basically to power to the people, right? And we have that power if we just use it.
Yeah, if we realize that we have it.
First of all, we have to realize it.
Yeah.
But in Europe, they actually have it into their constitutions that you can use referendums. You get a certain percentage of people voting on an issue, and then they come out to vote. And that.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I mean, like, this is probably like a half mile back from the Arc.
At least.
Filled with people.
Yeah, that's the Arc de Triomphe. That's the Champs-Élysées. Yeah, that's kind of where it started, right there. Yeah.
We don't demonstrate like this here.
Not yet.
Any time something like this begins to happen, the French people take to the streets and shut it down.
That's right.
Try to, at least.
That's right.
And so, good job, France.
Thank you, France.
Yeah.
Because we need that in this country. We need people in the streets. And what I was going to say about the referendum process is that that's actually a way that people can bring up issues and get a national vote. And
without
as long
having
as you
to wait for the election cycle.
That's right. And you can already make a statement to your government and make them accountable. Let's say if you're voting on an initiative, let's say you're voting on a Green New Deal, or you're voting on Medicare for All. If you had a referendum, you could, and 70% of the people that are eligible to vote came out to vote on it, and the majority of the vote was yes. Guess what? Then you could make the representatives accountable and say, you're going to get this done. And we could every step of the way we could make our representatives accountable, but because we don't do that, because people are comfortable, as Kelly Carlin, George Carlin's daughter, said to me, they're comfortable saving their own convenient lives, and they stay home and watch reality TV and sports and drink a beer. Not that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but
it's certainly not helping.
No, it's not helping when you don't get out and you say, look, every step of the way you should be making representatives accountable to what is in the best interest of the true majority, which is actual, real participatory democracy. But because people don't want to do that, then we have all these problems, and decades go by and we're still not solving them. So I think, like Thomas Jefferson said something to the extent of every generation should have a revolution. We're long overdue. And I think, based on the signs that I see, the hubris of the 0.01%, who don't seem to be in any hurry to go even beyond a resolution on a Green New Deal. They don't apparently want Medicare for All because it costs too much money, even though over $700 billion is the military budget of the year.
Goes right to the military. And we also give another, I think, $100 billion to the government of Israel.
Last I heard was 40. Did it get raised?
Oh, 40?
But still,
still a big chunk. That probably pays for their universal health care.
Well, I'm sure it does. Even after they're required to buy some of our military too, so that keeps our economy going, that part of the economy going.
Right.
But the insanity of this is the hubris. I really don't think they have a clue, Norm. I really don't think they understand how people are hurting out there. At least 40% of the population doesn't have enough for their basic necessities.
Yeah, or maybe they do, and they appreciate the power that it makes them feel they have. You could go that way too.
Yeah.
I hope that's. I hope it is just them being rich and inbred and aloof, but I think they probably know and don't care.
Well, then we've seen from history what happens when that's the case.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, let's move on to Venezuela, because these things just keep happening, folks.
And they're not going to stop, which is why we got to keep the conversation going.
Now, this is sort of a similar situation, right? We had some election conflict, and our guy that we wanted didn't get elected by the people, so What happened there?
Well, it's a very confusing situation, but which is, I don't know all the details of Maduro's administration, right? But I do understand that he was, democratically elected, and I know that some people question that. But I also know Chavez, his elections were heavily monitored, including by the Carter Center, Jimmy Carter's center.
Okay.
And at that time, they saw some of the most organized, democratic, elections that they'd ever monitored.
So Chavez was the guy who we were sort of conditioned not to like, right?
Right.
Because he was always making fun of George Bush, and
he called him the devil or whatever.
Right to
and at the UN.
Yeah, and when George Bush Jr. left, he said, "Oh, I'm glad," something like, "I'm glad the smell of sulfur has left the room," or like, "I can still smell the sulfur."
Oh wow!
In the air, and yeah, so.
And they tried to kill him. There was an attempted military coup on both he and Maduro, and the Maduro coup actually had a drone bomb.
Really?
Yeah.
I wonder who that.
But
came from.
that got kind of in the media blackout as well.
Right.
And Guaido, it went to George Washington University. He has 2 degrees from an American university, so he's obviously hooked into people here somehow.
Right.
I'm not going to claim to have any inside information on that, but if you're going to school here, chances are, and even if you're connected to an American oil company or a European oil company,
or if your country just happens to have a shit ton of oil.
Yeah, right. I mean, my thing is, what about sovereignty? Right? Because let's say, what if Citgo, which is the National Venezuelan Oil Company, Citgo, what if, and we have stations here, what if they were to say, okay, we found some new oil in Texas, so we're going to go to Texas and demand that the landowners there give us the price that we want so that we can process that oil ourselves and sell it. Do you think the Texas landowners would say, what about our sovereignty? What about democracy? Right? They would. They'd be up in arms, literally, probably. But somehow, if it's us in Venezuela, it's a different story. Why? Especially when we have a history of intervention. You can read Naomi Klein's Shock Doctrine book. I mean, if that isn't enough, I don't know what to say. But if you don't respect their sovereignty, the sovereignty that it's their land.
Yeah, Venezuela didn't get the massive influx of German immigrants after World War II that Brazil and Argentina did.
Yeah.
But it's such a weird thing, and it's this like sort of history repeating itself. But obviously, if land sovereignty meant anything to these people, the people of Africa would be the richest in the world.
That's right.
for the resources that are under their feet.
That's right.
And unfortunately, that's never come to fruition with colonialism and the monopolies that exist down there on diamonds and
imperialism.
In 2024, I rediscovered Caleb Maupin, who I had first seen in videos at Zuccotti Park during Occupy Wall Street.
In order to understand how we got to where we are now, you do have to understand some history, right? So I think providing that information, so here's some tools, here's some information for you, and CPI is doing a great job. Well, what are some examples of some of the books that you've published or had republished?
Well, the first book we ever published was The Green Book by Muammar Gaddafi, because, Libya, under the leadership of Gaddafi, had the highest life expectancy in Africa. They had built the world's largest irrigation system, the Great Man-Made River. And so we wanted to show people what it was that, that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama destroyed with their bombing campaign in 2011, and how it was that the most prosperous country in Africa was reduced to rubble, and what NATO, this criminal organization, what it had done done in Libya. So we published the Green Book, which is the manifesto of the Libyan government. We have also published a number of books, about socialism in the United States, socialist history, about economics, trying to give a new perspective, because we do feel like, a lot of the left are very, very loyal to the Democratic Party, and they view the masses of the American people as their enemy, and that's a huge mistake. And so we have to rethink left and right in our time. I'm a religious person. I believe in God. I'm a Christian, and I think that Christian faith and socialism walk hand in hand. Obviously there was horrendous persecution of Christians during the Cold War time, but the communist world has largely changed its perspective. The head of the Russian Communist Party, who I've met, Gennady Zyuganov, he's a Christian. He's a Russian Orthodox Christian. Nicolas Maduro, the leader of Venezuela, is a Roman Catholic. Daniel Ortega of Nicaragua, not only is he a Roman Catholic, but the slogan of the government is Christianity, socialism, and solidarity. And that we need to rethink left and right and how we orient ourselves, because unfortunately, I think a lot of the most ugly capitalist politics, this degrowth notion that human beings are a cancer, the radical individualism where everyone feels a need to yell at everybody else and tear them down the way people do on social media. Unfortunately, a lot of the left has embraced that. And a lot of Americans are rightly threatened by that. They don't appreciate that. And I think that, is those sentiments of resisting the low-wage police state and the degrowth and the march toward World War III and the kind of elements of control that are being imposed on our population right now. That is where the socialists and the anti-imperialists need to be. And we don't need to be with the left. It's almost kind of trying to enforce it and sees the enemy as the population. And that's, CPI is kind of new in our orientation. We tell people we're not left, we're not right, we're anti-war, we're socialists, and we're patriots. And we're patriots too. We love our country, right? And, if you don't love your country, why should the country listen to you? If you're not motivated by trying to make things better in your country, what do you have to say? It's just kind of common sense. If you're in Brazil, you're a political leader in Brazil, you should be trying to make Brazil better. If you're in Greece and you're trying to make Greece, you're a political leader, you should be trying to make Greece better. It's just common sense. But unfortunately, a lot of the left has gotten into this kind of weird identity politics place where it's not about actually trying to make things better. It's about demonstrating how good you are. It's a virtue signaling. And I think that's a problem. And so in order to do the work that needs to be done, we've had to, separate ourselves from the mainstream of the left. And I think, but, we'll talk to anybody. The fact that I'm here in LA for this event, right? The idea of me doing something with this particular church, 5-10 years ago, I would have thought was outrageous. Right. And they probably would have thought the same thing. Exactly. But the world is changing, and we should embrace that change, because the world is constantly changing and evolving, and I'm constantly learning. I don't think exactly what I thought 10 years ago. I don't think you do either, right? And it's important to be able to learn and reconsider. Back to, I think in the late 1700s, there was a writer named Robert Malthus, and he looked at the French Revolution happening across the Channel. He was in England, and he said, the French Revolution happened because there's too many people, and that this is called overpopulation. And he wrote this essay called The Principle of Population Growth, where he argued that every effort needed to be made to not prolong the life of the poor. And to have the poor die sooner in order to keep the population low, in order to have stability in society. And then we later know that in the late 1800s, the Neo-Malthusian Society was very popular among many of the wealthiest people in Britain. And they thought that all these problems of unemployment and labor strikes and uprisings, they said, well, this isn't the problem of capitalism. This is just there's too many people. And the phrase "useless eaters" was widely promoted. And the idea was that there are too many people in the world. There's overpopulation. I know Margaret Sanger, who was a feminist and a socialist activist, she, after the Russian Revolution, she saw that the Soviet Union was not the free sex, free love paradise she was hoping for. And so she became a Malthusian. And during the Great Depression, she went around saying that the Great Depression was caused by overpopulation. And she spoke at Ku Klux Klan meetings. She argued that birth control and abortion could be used to eliminate certain races and certain ethnic groups, and that she went from being a socialist to being, a far-right racist and such because she bought into this idea that we need to reduce the population. There are too many people in the world, and that is how many of the richest people in the world feel. And I don't think that's hard to discover, and it's not conspiratorial. The idea that they're all sitting up there in a smoke-filled room plotting to kill the whole human race, I don't buy, right? That would obviously be crazy. But the idea that many of them believe that the problem facing the world is there are too many people and that there's too much growth, that is being widely promoted. That is almost the party line in the United States. And it's wrong. It's not true, right? The human race, human beings are the source of all wealth. We're not useless eaters. Human beings are the creators of all the value that exists in the world. With human beings, we can advance. And people talk about limited resources. This is a very common thing I hear from people. Well, it's true that there are limited resources in the world. And, if we were still burning wood to heat our homes, we would have deforested the planet centuries ago. But we don't. We started burning coal, and now we burn natural gas. We have electrical heat. And that the whole history of the human race is our reinvention of our relationship with nature, right? When one fuel source, one energy source, one mode of production becomes outmoded, we reach a higher plane. And that's why China is putting so much money and funding into fusion energy research right now, because fossil fuels has its limitations.
Later that year, I co-founded a chapter here in Los Angeles of the Center for Political Innovation with Ishmael Lopez Reyes. In May of 2025, we created a workshop with Caleb Maupin here in Los Angeles that was called Do You Believe in Growth? A New Day for Los Angeles and a New Day for America.
As I went walking that river highway, I saw the bubbles that in the sky. I saw before me the great San Diego Valley. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me.
And they start having various wars around the world, the Vietnam War, the Korean War, etc. But it gets to the point where the economic problems created by technology gets to the point that war becomes constant. They have to constantly be having wars, because that's the only way they can keep their system going. War becomes constant. And one aspect of globalism imperialism is that they were able to have stability in the homeland because they bought off a section of the working class. We know about in the 1950s, the white picket fence and Leave It to Beaver and the comfortable life that a lot of white working class people had. Well, that's gone, right? The comfortable middle class that exists within the imperialist centers is now being liquidated and being gotten rid of. And we're entering a period where war is becoming constant. In order to maintain the system, they have to constantly be at war. And the imperialist homelands, the United States, Britain, France, Germany, these countries are deteriorating from within. Because in order to maintain this global international system, just to keep things flowing, they have to be committed to wars around the world. They have to be maintaining this global system, and they can't maintain the homeland. And so things are becoming more and more unstable here at home. And that we're entering a period where really the only way they can continue to make profits is with destructions, a period of destructive accumulation. And this is what Rosa Luxemburg predicted. World War I was the beginning of a process that would lead to a situation of constant, endless war and destructive accumulation. And she compared it to the fall of the Roman Empire. And that's kind of what happened to Rome, is that Rome spread itself all out over the globe, and pretty soon it got to the point that the whole thing fell apart because they were trying to maintain a system and they couldn't maintain peace at home. And we're going to talk more about the Roman Empire after lunch, but I guess I'll just make this point. Was the fall of the Roman Empire a good thing? No, right? Obviously the Roman Empire was bad. It was a horrendous empire, slavery, and all kinds of awful things, but what replaced it wasn't better. The human life expectancy decreased by years as a result of the fall of the Roman Empire. The human height went down by inches because of the fall of the Roman Empire. There was a huge amount of instability that followed, and what replaced this brutal, horrific empire in Rome was instability and chaos on a new level that led to all of civilization suffering. And that's what kind of separates CPI from a lot of leftists out there. There's a lot of leftists say, well, this country's racist, and this country's evil, burn it down, tear it down. It's like, well, what's going to come next? They're more interested in the vengeance and the, and getting their feelings out there, but they're not saying what actually comes next. And we have people that look at our 4-point plan and they say, why are you always trying to save the country? Why are you always trying to save the system? Because I live here. Because, as bad as things might be in the United States, I really like that these lights work, the electricity. I really like when I go to the water and I turn it on, and it comes out. And if you're living in a society that's collapsing, that doesn't happen. Anyone who's ever been through a war or a huge amount of economic chaos, it's not a good thing. We don't want America to collapse. We want America to be reborn. We know that this economic order that the United States is at the center of isn't working. And we know that the United States has to change in order to survive. But we are motivated by love of our community, love of our country, and opposition to what this system is doing to it. And that's a fundamental difference that we have. Leftism is very much tainted by this kind of vengeful, angry aesthetic. Whereas we are looking at the economic realities of the situation and we're saying we have to change things. And that there are divisions within our ruling elite now that are creating the opening for a movement that could actually change things. So, I've obviously got plenty more to say, but that's kind of the basics of where we're at in terms of the global and economic situation.
Each week, depending on the issue and what is happening in our community and the country around the world, we have different activities.
Because we're all going through something different every day. One day you feel like you don't have any hope. The very next day you're feeling like, I can do this because you've seen what the community is doing around you. But as of right now, it feels like it's around 25%, but we're hoping we can get that percentage down more and more as people are seeing the options, as we're putting the options out there. Just a few days ago, Altogether, that's the other group that I'm a part of.
Wow, there's a lot.
That's
great. There's a lot going on.
Just a few days ago, a group called Altogether, which they're working on finding, getting neighborhood captains in every single area of Altadena so we can communicate with the larger network on the building needs of our individual neighborhoods. So I'm the neighborhood captain of my neighborhood along with one other neighbor. And anyways, that group, we recently put out our very first kind of a guide on options that people have that had no insurance or feel like they cannot afford to rebuild. And so for the first time, we finally have our first guide out there on their options currently.
Supposedly, November the 5th in Washington, D.C., it's the beginning of the fall of the Trump fascist regime. Now, we're here in Little Tokyo. What in the world does that mean? And, we're here with our Hands Off Venezuela signs, and we're getting positive response from the street and from people walking by. And, I think, when I think of this Trump fascist regime thing, I think of Richard Nixon's autobiography. And there's a section in there during the Vietnam War when there was a protest and school buses were lined up around the White House, blocking it. And Nixon himself writes in his own memoir that he and Henry Kissinger, who was the Secretary of State at the time, were looking out the window at these buses, and Nixon commented to Henry Kissinger, "Henry, they're coming to get us."
I'm still trying to remember.
Well, we're at the farmers market here in Hollywood. We've learned some things about what's going on here in California. It might be different in state by state because a lot of programs are maybe funded by the federal government, but they're administrated in various ways state by state. I spoke with the manager, and she said that here in California, if you have a zero balance on your card, that they are giving you like automatic $15 for food, mainly produce and stuff like that. But she also said that they've heard some people have received their regular benefits for the month, so apparently it's going to be a month-by-month thing. Again, I don't know how that differs from state to state, which that's, I guess, an ongoing learning process.
And like a lot of people are embarrassed to say that they take that they use EBT,
Exactly.
and they don't want to take the paper because they're fine, but they are here in the stand changing the EBT stands for exchangeable currency to be able to use in the farmers market.
Money.
Monopoly money.
Yeah.
Do you need a bag?
Oh no, that's on the house right there.
There's a lot of people in the EBT line. The looks on the faces say it all.
Brother, I like your sign a lot. Could I ask you about it?
Yeah, sure.
All right. You are live on No Jumper, brother. What is Hands Off Venezuela? What's going on for those that don't know?
So for those who don't know, right now the U.S. is trying to destabilize Venezuela again, to try to take its resources by claiming that the government is in cahoots with narco traffickers. While we all know that the CIA, like there's a 60-minute segment that shows that a general that was smuggling was actually a CIA asset.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like a...
So kind of like mirroring what happened with the Iran-Contra. Yeah, it sounds like El Salvador in the 80s.
Yeah, definitely. But this was in the 90s when Venezuela is still not in a socialist government.
Okay.
Yeah.
And why do I keep hearing about Israel's involvement?
The Venezuelan government has been very outspoken about the genocide that's currently going on in Gaza. So if you have a legit government calling you out by name and word, by calling it a genocide, saying that you're committing genocide out loud, I don't think you're gonna like as Israel hearing that, like when having that.
They don't want to get put on blast.
Yeah, they don't want to get put on blast. You could insinuate it and be fine with it, but like they don't want to be called out for what it is, because like there's meaning, like legally there's meaning to those words, like so
Okay.
there's retribution, but.
Well, at the end of the day, it's money in politics. I mean, it doesn't matter where that money is coming from necessarily. I mean, there's lobbyist groups of all kinds. And, when Obama was president, the Supreme Court passed Citizens United, which put that on steroids.
Right.
Basically, it had already been in place, but now anything goes. And we're seeing the influence of AIPAC in practically every part of our government. You know what I mean? So it's like, and even Trump, I think at the Knesset even admitted, to the world that, we're getting all this money from, Miriam Edelson and all this. And, the irony of this event here is George Soros funds a lot of the No Kings events. And he's technically, by principle, you could say he's a king.
Yeah,
a lot of
literally.
money,
Like,
and he
is that the
influences-
richest dude in the world, kind of?
You know what I mean? So we really do need a government of action for working families. So
this event is being funded by George Soros.
Not just him, but like
not just him, but it's just the irony
People of that
that,
nature. Yeah,
is
that's
interesting.
super ironic.
I mean,
Yeah.
he's the more public figure, I guess, and all that. There's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that we have no idea.
Like I've been saying, these are all like Marvel supervillains, essentially. Now, there's a large number of Venezuelan migrants in Chicago, and there's been a lot of controversy around that. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, those are people
New York as well.
New York too. Those are people that left Venezuela due to the sanctions and the blockade.
Right. Which we've been doing for a long time.
When the oil prices went down, the government couldn't no longer subsidize their businesses, so people had to leave to neighboring countries. And then when the Biden administration came in, they had a more relaxed borders policy.
Right.
And then there was a lot of the Zionist groups were involved in funding a lot of organizations that were helping to bring migrants, making them believe that they're going to have great benefits. And
what was the beneficial of the Zionists to do that, though? How does that benefit them?
There's attempts to destabilize like the modern electorates. Like you are able to switch the demographics of an electorate.
Interesting.
Well, that's the thing is that the ruling class, even to some extent, is divided because they have a choice. How do you want to grow your economy? How do you want to create an economy? You either do it through economic development by going into countries like, say, for instance, Russia or China. They'll go into Africa,
right.
Ethiopia or Burkina Faso, and they'll actually invest in the countries, and help them develop. You know what I mean? And that's what basically Gaddafi was doing
in Africa back in the day.
And unfortunately,
I know that for a fact, because
yeah.
I had a roommate in overseas that at the end of the 80s that basically confirmed that I'm the reason why I'm here is I'm going to school because of the Gaddafi government for free.
I've heard that too
know
from people.
That they were the strongest economy at the time, and then we bombed them back to the Stone Age. Remember?
Literally,
we came, we saw it.
And now slavery is back in their country.
That's right, and it's
Sudan's going crazy too.
So China and Russia could invest in countries, create economic development for those countries and also within, right? So the same thing can happen here. Like, of course, we should support, peace talks. It doesn't matter if it's Trump and Putin or Joe Schmo and Bill Haley, whatever. Doesn't matter. We need peace. And
1,000%.
And the peace bridge, would be great economic development for both the United States and Russia, because this has been discussed over 100 years. It's a peace bridge between Siberia and Alaska. That's why they met in Alaska. People don't know that.
The Bering Strait.
The Bering Strait. They talked about this. Stalin and FDR both thought that was a good idea back then, and it was over 100 years old. I think even Lincoln
reconnecting Pangea is a very interesting concept.
You've been very informative.
Yeah, you guys were intelligent.
Thank you so much for speaking with us today.
We're almost there.
Wow, you guys inspire me a lot. Just want to say that. This has just been an amazing whole week. One of the things that we do a lot in LA, and we all do really as a group, is outreach. Where even when you're out and about doing social things, you're always talking to people. Always. And I find the more I do outreach, almost every time CPI comes in a conversation. And it's so important to be face to face, and I have to tell you, it looks a lot better seeing you in person than it does just seeing you online all the time. So, okay. I want to increase that too. I'd like to see us do this more often, and please come to LA. So I asked myself, who am I? Well, there's a lot of things. I wear a lot of hats, so I put in the context of activism. The first thing I did, I guess as an activist, was be a media ambassador for Adopt-A-Minefield, which is a program of the United Nations of the USA. I wrote an article for their international newsletter, and I worked in a Hollywood press corps 1 year. It was a great experience. I met a lot of people from all over the world. And I learned that, when people will tell you, you can't change the world, I realized that was absolutely not true. What we did as a community is, I think we pretty much stopped the creation of landmines. Now, it went to drone bombs, but anyway, but we did stop, we planted that seed, the horrible things that would be in the ground that were discovered, decades later, in Vietnam, etc. So we only had certain countries that we worked in. But I also, after that, I think it was Occupy Los Angeles. So since Adopt-A-Minefield put me in their media team, I thought that's where I want to go. If I can't do arts and education, that's where I'm going to go, and that's where I ended up. And I learned more about economic injustice. I realized how ignorant I was of many things. Didn't really know more of the details, believe it or not, of the Banking Act, the Glass-Steagall Act, and I learned, and that and so many more things that it just boggled my mind. I go home at night, get on my computer, and oh my God. And that's the first time I saw an image of this gentleman here, the hippie here, sitting here. It was Occupy Wall Street. And the next thing that I did was working with KPFK, because I realized the importance of building community, and someone asked me if I wanted to be on the committee, and then I was the acting chair of their community advisory board. I didn't have to get involved in their infighting politically, and I could just communicate with the community and get their feedback about what they liked and didn't like about community radio. And from there, I created my own cable access television channel because a brand new studio opened in the city where I live. And I like to learn. I'm an educator as well as an entertainer. I like to learn. I like to ask questions, and I like to go directly to the source. So when David Bowie died, what was it like working with David Bowie? I talked to the person that worked with him more than anybody else. What was it like working with the Beach Boys and the Monkees? I interviewed people from the Wrecking Crew. What is this thing called the Freedom Dividend? I talked directly to Andrew Yang about it. What is the Green New Deal in your perspective? I talked to Jill Stein. What is this thing called CPI? And I talked to this gentleman here. The next thing I did was the pandemic. And I was convinced I am not staying inside my house all day long in California where the sun is shining and there's still the beach, okay? So, and I found that there were a lot of people that were going through a lot of serious trauma about what was going on. And I just felt the need not only for community, which I had to travel a long way to get to on the west side of Los Angeles, but I also felt the need to be more educated about what is going on here. We're not being told the truth. So I've co-founded a group called Natural Health First, and really, health is about mind, body, and soul. All of it, right? So it's really important on all levels. And the next thing I did was meeting and interviewing Caleb Maupin, and realizing that there was a need in Los Angeles, because I saw the potential for a movement that Occupy Wall Street, Los Angeles, and all around the world. They dropped the ball. They didn't do it right. They made a lot of mistakes. I saw the mistakes. I can write a book about it. But I said, this guy's on track. He gets it. He is exactly on point. And he was there too. And he popped up in my algorithms probably because of our mutual friends, the Combo Couch. And I started watching his live stream, and I thought, this is it. This is it. You're talking about economics. Most people don't. I grew up middle class, lower middle class, poor, and nobody talks about, economics. They leave that conversation almost completely out all the time, unless they see their taxes getting raised. Then they want to talk about something, So I think what we need, why CPI for me? Well, that's just the background story of it. I think we also need a new renaissance. We need not just music, but remember, or arts or painting or whatever from the original one, but it's also economics, it's also spirituality, it's also political, and maybe even more so, it's about what we're doing, community building, to make all that happen. And I also learned from all my work that it's so important don't limit yourself, local stuff, national stuff, international stuff. I can see CPI in Europe, in Asia, in Russia, in China, etc. Get my drift? Yeah. But like Margaret Mead said, you don't need the majority of people. All you need is a significant number of people, whatever that is, and you can change the world. I saw it just from the landmine crisis, and it happened. It's not a myth. So, like CPI, also we need to focus on, when we do our outreach, I think we need to focus on the 4-point economic plan. And remember, when you talk about the universe, spirituality, that's everything, and that's everyone. So it's not just any one group, and certainly not your ego or mine. Okay, that's another thing we have to have checks and balances on ego, right? So, and understand how we use words also, as well as what the words mean, understanding history, but also, as we do as well, understand what's going on, current events, and address things currently. Like, we don't want another years of lead, right? We want Ibrahim Traore to be more on the awareness, consciousness of people, to understand he's the kind of role model we need in this world right now, who's not afraid to speak up and take action. We need the Uhuru movement, right? But we also need CPI, because. And I just want to say, again, thank you all. You are so inspirational to me. Sorry, I do get emotional when something is really important to me. Piggyback on what Caleb said, everybody just works together. It's just simply wonderful. And as far as my closing remark is, yes, we need to transition to something better. Do you know why? Because abundance is for everyone!
Now is the time for a new renaissance.
The conversation is long overdue.
Check out the series New Renaissance on The Nowman Show on the Arroyo Channel on YouTube. Here's a little clip.
I think we need a new renaissance. What can we do together to help make the world a better place?
Well, I mean, I know there are those who would say we're in a tech renaissance, but to make the world a better place, you know, on a practical level, you got to get money out of politics in America. That's the square root of all of our problems. But on a bigger level, America needs love. We need more love in our hearts. We need more love we give to others. We need to receive more love from others. And I think that only when love can replace the anxiety and fear and competitiveness and strife that defines American life for so many of us, can we have the kind of society where someone won't feel so desperate enough that they'll want to take a gun and hurt a lot of people, where they'll want to outsource jobs and decimate a community, where they'll want to put low-income people in prison for consensual crimes that don't hurt anyone. I think that we need more empathy, and I think that we need more love, and I don't know how that's going to happen, but you know, we all get to choose every day if you're going to generate more angst or more love, and I think that's the sort of thing that has to be done on a very personal, individual, one-by-one level.
I agree, and we can start doing that right now. I think we need a new renaissance.
Okay.
What can we do together to make the world a better place?
I think more Renaissance fairs. That would help. And people always like, would you like some chicken on a stick? You know, something like that. What can we do to bring the world together? Maybe we should do one of those hands across the world. Remember we did hands across America? Remember that? Or we are the world. Maybe something like that. Maybe we could, maybe Beyonce and Jay-Z could put together something like that. I have no idea how we can bring people together. I really don't. I would say music.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Comedy's too cultural. Music kind of transcends.
That's true. That's a very good point. Renaissance. And I think we're going to get there, and we're going to get there because we work together, right?
Right. Strength and unity.
That's absolutely right. Strength and unity. That's right. That is right. And people over profits.
People over profits. Right.
This is New Renaissance. When something seems to be missing, the society of human behavior is on the brink of insanity, with a passion for hope and not just to cope with persistent pessimism, dreams of expression to replace the oppression, creating optimism. We need a new renaissance where music and art we can find. We need a new renaissance, theater of the sublime. We need a new renaissance, be more generous and kind. We need a new renaissance, something for the heart and the mind.
We need to be talking to each other.
Yeah, but it's a rich dump. It's a rich dump.